Right. Well, the latest WikiLeaks release revealed many close to Clinton have been kept in the dark about her private email server. In one email, Clinton ally Neera Tanden writes to the Clinton campaign chairman, John Podesta, this, quote, "Do we actually know who told Hillary she could use a private email? Has that person been drawn and quartered? The whole thing is blanking insane."
So, if they thought that it was so insane, how did they get away with this and cover it all up?
Joining us right now to weigh in is Judge Jeanine Pirro. Well, Judge, they thought they could get away with it because they weren't going to tell anybody.
Exactly. And what we find out from WikiLeaks is that, you know, when people say that Hillary Clinton is so experienced, well, I think that now the American public understands what her experience is like. She engages in a world of dark secrecy where even her top aides don't know what she's doing. She keeps everyone in the dark, and as a result of that, the people that she's working with say it's insane, it's crazy, they need to be drawn and quartered, whoever told her she could do this, and putting our top secrets at risk in the email. But it gets better, because then we see that the woman is so robotic and so orchestrated that they say, gee, maybe we can, you know, put some humor into this, and maybe, you know, today she wasn't such, make some jokes. Today she wasn't such a bee, blank, blank, blank. And you realize that Hillary Clinton is not so much a real person as she is someone who goes through her aides in terms of what's to be said, a PR firm in terms of what can be said, and then her lawyers in terms of what legally can be said. And it's just ugly. It's horrific. And even they understood how dangerous it was, and they said, we should have gotten this out 18 months ago.
Doesn't it just show, you know, she said, what I say in private is different from what I say in public, and her campaign is similar because they're saying, oh, it's not a big deal. You know, we followed the law. It wasn't classified information. But then you read their emails to each other and like, holy cow, this is happening.
They are panicked, and that's why they're saying this person should be drawn and quartered. They know that this is a violation of the law. And then in one of the emails they say, oh, not to worry, it's been taken care of, or hasn't been, you know, and you realize that they're saying the fix is in. So you've got this clan that is this octopus of financial and political and powerful connections where the FBI ultimately says not to worry, it was bad, but don't worry about it. And they know how bad it's been, how politically dangerous it is, and yet they have this face for America like, we're here, we're in it for you. They're not.
But they can't say anything to her, which I find so striking. In a lot of these emails, the staff kind of comes off as the adults, and it's Bill and Hillary Clinton who are sort of out of control, but they don't have the courage to confront them directly. What does that say about her management style, where her own closest aides are afraid to speak clearly to her?
They're afraid of her, clearly. They're afraid of her. I mean, the fact that they refer to her as a, you know, the B word and, you know, saying, can we add some humor to this? It makes it clear that she engages in a world of her own where not only is she not willing to take any criticism, but she doesn't even want people in her world to know what she's doing. And her world is all about power and money for she and her husband.
Over the last week, I know the Trump campaign has had this women's empowerment tour throughout portions of Florida. You were down there watching what was going on. The reaction to the Trump ladies?
Well, you know what? It's very interesting what's going on in Florida. I was there yesterday, got back last night, a little delayed because of what happened with Governor Pence at LaGuardia. But a lot of women supporting Trump in Florida. There is a group of women. It's Lara Lee Trump, and I've got a lot of this on my show this weekend, along with Diamond and Silk, the two women who are so hysterical, Omarosa, and several other women who are going through Florida, connecting with women. And I spoke to a lot of them who were like, you know what? We love Donald Trump because of what he's going to do for us, what he's going to do for our pocketbooks, for our families, for our security, for our safety. And the numbers are turning. And you could just feel it. It was palpable. I'm telling you, everything is changing. And people now know who Hillary is, and people now understand what Donald Trump can do for us. And you can feel it. I was there.
And we can see the road trip on your show.
The road trip on Saturday and Sunday on Justice.
Very well.
Thank you, Judge.
Great to see you.
Newt Gingrich joins us right now from our nation's capital. Good morning to you, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Good morning.
There's so much stuff to talk about, between WikiLeaks and everything else. It has been revealed, earlier this week we were talking about Dr. Jill McCabe, who is the wife of a high-ranking FBI guy. He actually was in charge of the FBI field office in Washington, D.C. when they were looking into her private email server. As it turns out, we revealed that something like $500,000 from Terry McAuliffe's PAC went to her campaign, and then a couple $100,000 from the state Democratic Party. And now, Mr. Speaker, it has been revealed that there was a fundraiser for her, and Hillary Clinton personally was a headliner at the fundraiser for the wife of the FBI guy. Mr.
Yes.
Speaker, how crazy is that?
Well, look, as long as you start with the idea that corruption has now penetrated the Obama administration at levels we have never seen in American history, that Hillary is the personification of that corruption, that it has corrupted the FBI, it's corrupted the IRS, the Veterans Administration is clearly corrupt. You go down the list. What the American people are facing is a genuine crisis in whether or not we're going to be a government that has the rule of law, or we're going to decay like Venezuela into a country where, as long as you're powerful, you can get away with anything. This is one of many utterly insane things that the Clintons believe they can get away with, and the truth is they do. She's raised huge amounts of money out of presumably honest people who are willing to tolerate having a totally corrupt, dishonest president because they think it's in their interest to do so.
Mr. Speaker, this is why a lot of people like Donald Trump. He wants to drain the swamp, as he says. Tired of the establishment. Does this happen in Washington on both sides of the aisle, or is this just...
No. This is... Look, you can go back to the Harding administration in the 1920s, the Grant administration in the early 1870s, maybe a little bit of Truman in the late 1940s. None of those are like this. This is the most corrupt person ever to run for the presidency of the United States. The scale, as we're learning from WikiLeaks, the scale and the depth of her collective team, not just her collective team's contempt for the law, their willingness to lie, their willingness to run over the law, their willingness to subvert the justice system. The damage Comey has done to the FBI may not be recoverable for a generation. It's terrible to watch one of the great law enforcement institutions of all time decay into this kind of corrupt behavior. And there's no other way to describe it.
So, Mr. Speaker, Obamacare is, of course, collapsing. We're paying attention to it again. But it's been hurting people since it was passed. But it's been hurting a specific group. It doesn't hurt the rich. They've got their own coverage. It doesn't hurt the poor, of course, because they're fully subsidized. It hurts the middle class, the group that doesn't vote Democrat in the first place. Do you think that was by design?
I think that the left is very happy if Obamacare collapses, because it'll be their excuse to go to a British or Canadian-style government-run system, which is what they wanted all along. And if you'll notice, the architect of the system said 2 days ago, Dr. Emanuel said that the dramatic rise in cost was always part of the plan. If you look at the demonstration, and again, let's talk about honesty and corruption. You look at what Barack Obama said publicly as a candidate, and you look at what his team knew, it's a level of dishonesty that is breathtaking. Richard Nixon must be looking down and wondering what he did wrong, that he couldn't be as clever as these people are at total dishonesty.
Well, and now he's blaming the media for it.
Well, of course. You always know with Obama it's somebody else's fault. It's never his fault. And the truth is, you look at his approval numbers, you have a country today in which an enormous number of Americans are willing to tolerate almost anything, and they're not digging very far beneath the surface, even though, as you just pointed out, it's costing them money. I have a good friend in Minnesota whose personal insurance, just for herself, is going to go up $2,400 a year in January, and she doesn't know that's the increase, that's not the cost. And at the same time, of course, her deductible is going to get bigger.
So why are Americans suddenly willing to put up with this level of corruption, do you think?
I think it's partly where the culture is. I think we're numb from all the stuff you see every day in social media. Where I describe it as the age of the Kardashians. We're in a period where, you can do almost anything and get away with it. You can say almost anything and get away with it. And people are kind of numb. The school system has taught don't render judgment, don't discriminate, don't have a sense of right and wrong. Well, you've got 2 or 3 generations now that have been told, you shouldn't really be judgmental. Well, the truth is, corrupt, honest, that's a pretty big judgment call, and that goes against everything we've been teaching for 3 generations.
Sure. Mr. Speaker, we're 11 days out. Mainstream media is saying, for the most part, she's ahead, she's going to win, show's over, don't even bother voting. You Republicans, don't waste gas driving to the polling place. You've seen a lot of elections. 11 days out, how does it appear, and I know you're on the Trump train, how does he win?
Well, I think he wins by 2 different factors. One is by the continual, every single day, weighing down of Clinton with the truth, which is happening around him. And if he lets that continue to happen and doesn't distract people with other kind of issues, it'll just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think that is wearing down her support among independents, her support among Democrats who aren't automatic partisans. And then second, he's got to make sure he turns out his vote. I think things like the New Deal for African Americans, which he announced 2 days ago, his contract with the American voter, which is a very attractive, go down item by item compared to what he stands for and what Hillary stands for. I think that if they have a positive Trump and they allow the negative stuff to continue to play out on Hillary, I think he has a very real chance to win. It's absurd to suggest that this election is over. And I'm always amazed that the people, particularly on the left, who want to rush in and explain that it's all over. I remember when John Kerry was elected in 2004, except he wasn't.
Right. And what about establishment Republicans who have kind of backed away from Donald Trump, but now, 11 days out, for instance, Nikki Haley yesterday said, you know what? I am going to vote for Donald Trump. And
about policy.
There are more and more establishment Republicans realizing, you know what? If I don't vote for Trump, really that is a vote for Hillary.
Yeah, from an establishment perspective, if they come out for Trump and he loses, it's not their fault. I mean, they can say, look, I did what I could. I'm sorry he lost. If they don't come out for Trump and he loses, they become the people who are the margin of defeat.
Right.
And I think that's a big factor. The other thing that's going on is, as you watch even, MSNBC Morning Joe, for example, your competitor, out there spending 13 minutes attacking Hillary. I mean, things are bad when MSNBC attacks Hillary. And I think that says to the establishment Republicans, she is so sick. This whole process is so corrupt. How can I possibly not vote for Trump? And I think that is gradually getting people back in to say, yeah, I'm going to be for Trump.
I think that's exactly right. Speaker, great to see you this morning. Thanks a lot for that.
Thank
you.
Good
with you.
He wrote a bombshell book telling of his life inside the Clinton White House. But now our next guest, a former uniformed Secret Service agent, is coming under fire for doing so.
And now he's filing a lawsuit suggesting collusion between the Clinton campaign and those who have criticized him.
Former Secret Service officer and the author of the book Crisis of Character. We have had him on the show to talk about that book. His name is Gary Byrne, and he joins us again. Hey, Gary, good to see you.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning. So why the lawsuit?
Well, I wrote my book to get the truth out about the Clintons and my experiences. And many people in the Secret Service have written books about their careers, but they're usually agents. And when somebody in the uniform division comes out and writes a book and it turns out to be successful, David Brock referred to me as a smear merchant. I'm not a politician. I'm not part of the Washington, D.C. Elite who's used to being smeared or smears other people. I'm a career government employee. I'm a veteran of the Air Force, 25 years in federal law enforcement. I'm a good, honest, decent person. I told my story. It's true. David Brock and other media outlets have smeared me, called me a liar. The Retired Secret Service Agents Association came out and said I could have never saw what I saw. Well, that's incredibly inaccurate, because somebody from the Secret Service would probably know that I was subpoenaed 6 times and then eventually ordered to testify by the Supreme Court Justice Rehnquist. And I stand by everything in my book, and I'm defending it. And I'm trying to restore my reputation and the book's reputation.
When you say David Brock is the guy who runs that Media Matters website. It's,
correct.
It's a lefty blog. I think it's funded in part by George Soros.
Yes, it is.
Things like that. It has been trying to bail out the Clintons for years and years and years. So it's interesting. They suggest that you didn't have access to the Clintons, and we just put up a whole bunch of pictures where you're standing right next to them.
Yes, that's exactly right. And in some cases, I would say, you know, I don't know David Brock, but I would say he was spilling out anything he could to make me look bad, to try to. Here's the thing. Everybody knows that Hillary Clinton can't run on her record. So anybody that comes out and says anything truthful about him, they have to hammer him. And it's just, I realize it's part of the process, but I'm not part of that system, and I want to try to restore my reputation and my good word in the book.
Well, so you got hammered, but you also got ignored. I mean, if one of Trump's security detail wrote a book about covering Trump, I think that would be on Good Morning America every day for a week. Most media outlets just acted like your book never came out. So for our viewers who aren't familiar with the book, tell us what they would learn if they read it. So you're looking at the first employee in the history of the Secret Service who ever had to be compelled to testify against a sitting president in a criminal law case. I was subpoenaed 6 times in the Monica Lewinsky case. And you're right, Tucker. If this book, if what I saw was about a Republican, they'd be carving my face in the side of Mount Rushmore. But because it's about a liberal, the mainstream media comes out, they either ignore me or they rip me apart. Now, every mainstream media TV show had somebody on there to tear me apart and call me a liar, but they wouldn't give me the 10 minutes like you kind people did to explain myself and to tell the truth.
Well, Gary, what is the truth about Hillary Clinton? We're very close to the family, clearly. What do the voters need to know about her?
What they need to know is that she's cold, she's distant, she's angry. The real Hillary Clinton is the woman you saw during the Benghazi hearings that yelled, what difference does it make at this point? The real Hillary Clinton is the person who refused to pick up the phone and let a handful of men and women fight for 13 hours with a couple $100,000 worth of small arms when there were hundreds of millions of dollars of equipment and men and women around ready to rescue them, and she didn't make the call. That's the real Hillary Clinton. It's the real Hillary Clinton that defended her husband's affairs and the alleged assaults and slut-shamed those women. That's the real Hillary Clinton.
And, of course, in the WikiLeaks dumps, we've learned over something like 30,000 different emails that apparently there are a number of FBI agents who felt like she's the last person they wanted to work for as well. And one thing about Gary's book, Crisis of Character, we've heard rumors about it for years, but it does start with a story about a vase in the private residence. Somehow, after there was a melee of sorts up there, wound up broken, and it seems like somebody probably threw that at the former president, right, Gary?
Yeah, so here's the facts. There was a bad argument. It was so loud it was echoing through the mansion. At one point there was a crashing sound. When it was investigated, there was a broken vase found. I saw the broken vase the next morning in the curator's office. Later on, when President Clinton came over to the Oval Office, he clearly had a black mark under his eye and was trying to conceal it with makeup. So I don't know how he got the black eye. I don't know how the vase got broken, but those are the facts. Black eye, bad argument, broken vase.
Okay, you connect the dots.
It's quite a portrait of someone who claims to love humanity but doesn't like people very much. That's what it looks like to me.
No, she does not.
All right, the book is called Crisis of Character. Gary, thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being with you.
Thanks. Well, a remarkable new memo confirms what the rest of the country has suspected for years. Bill Clinton has been using his charitable activities to get almost unbelievably rich. Top Clinton aide Doug Band, who ran the Clinton Foundation, details how he helped President Clinton personally make millions of dollars. Personally. And much of the cash raked in from the foundation donors happened while Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. That was a major boon to their finances. Here to react is Alabama Senator Jeff Sessions. He is chairman of the Trump campaign's national security team and a key advisor to the candidate. Senator, thanks a lot for coming on this morning.
Thank you, Tucker.
So I want to read you part of this memo from Doug Band about Bill Clinton, Inc. that came to light in the WikiLeaks dumps. Here it is. Throughout the past almost 11 years since President Clinton left office, I have endeavored to support the Clinton Foundation and President Clinton personally. President Clinton's business arrangements have yielded more than $30 million for him personally, with $66 million to be paid out over the next 9 years should he choose to continue with the current engagements. So you have almost $100 million that he's bragging about in these emails. Is this a surprise to you, or did we know this?
These numbers are a surprise to me, Tucker. I knew he was making a lot of money on speeches for political reasons and connections that people were paying, not for the value of his speech, but those are stunning numbers. Another number that to me is just knocks my socks off is that he and Hillary gained $153 million in speaking fees alone since he left the White House. That is just unbelievable. People feel correctly that our leaders are spending too much time worrying about rich people and big fees and not enough time about their own interest and America's interest.
And yet it's not to excuse the Clintons to note that this is pretty conventional in Washington. I mean, I am certain that President Obama plans to get very, very rich from arrangements like this, from speeches, the second he leaves office. Is this the swamp that the Trump campaign is talking about draining?
Absolutely. We've got to do better about that. A lot of this money comes from foreign countries, which is doubly troubling. So Donald Trump's proposals are to tighten up dramatically the ability of foreign companies through lobbyists and other ways to fund politicians in the United States. It really needs to be tightened up. But fundamentally, what the American people feel is this is, in a way, a real corruption. It corrupts the purity of the interest of our leaders. They spend too much time raising money. Billions of dollars, $1 billion or more Hillary Clinton has raised for this campaign. Donald Trump has funded most of his own by his own money. And I think that allows him to be more effective in fighting against this kind of thing.
So there's a new report, Senator, that illegal immigrants are pouring over the border ahead of this election. They're afraid of a Trump win, but there's also the promise that a Hillary win would allow them to become citizens at some point. I mean, it seems to me, if that were to happen, if Hillary were to win and she were to legalize the illegals in this country now, that would constitute a massive and history-changing demographic, a voting bloc for Democrats. Am I misreading that?
Well, it's a huge thing. People don't realize how big it is. We admit 1.1 million a year lawfully,
right,
who go on to become citizens. Those, and then we have probably at least 500,000 or more entering unlawfully every year, maybe closer to 1 million. So these are historic numbers. We'll soon reach the highest percentage of foreign-born in America's history. It will continue to go up. Look, the American people are not against immigration. They're not against immigrants. Donald Trump does not hate immigrants, but we need a lawful system. We got to end the lawlessness, and we can do it. I've studied it. This can be done. It should be done.
Yep.
And if we don't, we're going to regret it. And it's a really impacting adversely the working conditions and wages of American workers.
And it's packing the electorate for Democrats, that's for sure. Senator, it's great to see you this morning. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you.
Right now, 11 days remaining until Election Day. Hillary Clinton is already making preparations for the White House. She is reportedly considering Vice President Joe Biden to be her Secretary of State. Joining us right now is former Congressman and Fox News contributor, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. Colonel, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you, Maria.
What do you make of this? Hillary Clinton considering Joe Biden for Secretary of State?
Well, I mean, the hits just keep on coming. I think one of the things we have to remember that this is a Vice President Joe Biden that said of President Obama's unilateral decision to withdraw the troops from Iraq, that would be one of the greatest decisions and one of the greatest successes ever. And look at what has happened from that one decision. I don't think that's the type of person we want to have as the Secretary of State. But then when you consider Hillary Clinton and her reset button with Russia, you consider the destabilization of Libya, what happened in Syria, when you consider that Barack Obama stood up and said that Yemen would be the example of his counterterrorism strategy, yet we have the Houthi rebels that are shooting missiles at our U.S. destroyers. Neither one of these individuals, Hillary Clinton nor Joe Biden or even Barack Obama, have shown their competence and an ability to be strategic decision makers.
Yeah, most people would agree that when we pulled out of Iraq, that's when ISIS rolled over the Iraqi army, took the U.S.'s technology and armaments, and actually ISIS was created and got worse.
I mean, we know that
absolutely.
Yeah. And we know that national security is one of the top issues of American voters, specifically women. And I think this is so important. What happens if Hillary Clinton is president to national security? What do you think?
Well, I think you will continue to see the decimation of our military forces. Right now, we have the smallest army since 1939, the smallest Navy since 1917. You know, one of the things people have forgotten that we went about 3 or 4 months without having a U.S. carrier battle group coverage in the Persian Gulf. We had to ask a French carrier battle group to cover us and continue our operations in the Persian Gulf.
Yeah.
We have the smallest Marine Corps since World War I and the oldest and smallest combat aircraft fleet in the Air Force since we created the modern Air Force. So you will continue to see that happen, and you will continue to see the disrespect and disregard of the United States. We just saw the president of the Philippines say that he was creating a separation between the United States of America, and 2 days ago he said in 2 years he wants all U.S. troops out of the Philippines.
Colonel West, you were talking about some of the problems that the Obama administration's been having in foreign policy. Can you also extend Joe Biden is not considered one of the more smooth and polished individuals or one of the more eloquent. How important is that capability in a Secretary of State? How much does diplomacy kind of depend on those sort of personal characteristics of the individual?
Well, it's incredibly important because the thing is you are carrying the image of the United States of America to other global leaders. And I think if we have someone like a Joe Biden, they will just continue to laugh at us, like the Russians did with the little reset toy button. And when you think about the type of people that are out there with Hassan Rouhani, Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, these are people that are very serious and they're very, very shrewd, and they're outmaneuvering the United States of America when you look at the advancement of their global goals and objectives. You look at what is happening in Syria, where Russia and China have implanted themselves. Iran is the regional hegemonic dominant power now in the Middle East, controlling 4 capitals there. This has all come in the last 7.5 years.
But before we rip on Vice President Biden for his shoot from the hip, loose lip style, that is Donald Trump. So Donald Trump wants the top job, not Secretary of State. So I just wanted to highlight the irony of that criticism. But Colonel, let's talk about Iran, because with this Iran deal, regardless of who wins, is it irreversible in terms of the power and the money that we've handed over to this state sponsor of terrorism?
Well, it's not irreversible, but you're definitely going to be on an uphill climb. And there is no doubt about the fact that we have enabled the #1 state sponsor of Islamic terrorism in the world to, without a doubt, be flush with cash. I think that we have to look at how we can go back and put on these type of sanctions, how we can work with other countries to start cutting off that flow of cash that goes in. But then you have an Obama administration that's been aiding a company like Boeing to have aircraft contracts with the Iranians. So there are a lot of things that we can turn back. But if we continue down the path of another 4 years of this type of foreign policy, we'll be looking at a new axis of evil between Iran, Russia, China, North Korea. And the one thing about Donald Trump, I would say that if he can surround himself with the right type of individuals that he will listen to, because this president has not listened to anyone but himself.
Yeah, he has a great team on the campaign trail, Colonel, and sometimes he clearly doesn't listen to them.
For sure. Now, Michelle Obama seems to be sort of an important element in Hillary Clinton's campaigning. Of course, she was bashing Trump yesterday on national security. Trump was fighting back. Listen to this, Colonel. I want to get your reaction.
Donald, you're the one who's got a lot to learn about the military and everything else that makes America great.
We want a president who takes this job seriously. Someone who we can trust with the nuclear codes, because we want to go to sleep at night knowing that our kids and our country are safe.
Hillary Clinton unleashed ISIS onto the world. You know that story. So we have no choice. We will stop ISIS, and we will stop them fast.
Colonel, your reaction? What was said on the trail yesterday?
Well, I find it, somewhat laughable that Michelle Obama would stand up there when her husband 2 years ago said that, let me make myself very clear, ISIS is not Islamic. Well, I'm trying to figure out what the heck does the I stand for. Is it Presbyterian? Is it Mennonite? Is it Baptist? So I don't need to have Michelle Obama trying to give national security strategy because her husband has been an abject failure.
Colonel, you were talking earlier about Iran and the 4 capitals that they essentially control. Let me ask you something. Iran's sort of like a virtual empire now, where instead of occupying countries, they use terror proxies to get their way and influence policy. What could be done in the new administration to try and roll back that strategy?
Well, without a doubt, you have to start looking at how you cut off their flow of men, material, and resource support. We've got to start, looking at building better alliances. One of the things we should have been doing is working with the Iraqi Kurds. We should have been working stronger with the Jordanians, with the Egyptians as well, and Israel. Because right now, when you look at Iran's support of the Quds Force, Hezbollah, and as well as Hamas, that's the way that they use these proxy entities to be able to control places such as Beirut, Lebanon, such as going in with the Houthi rebels in Sana'a, Yemen, and as well as going into Baghdad, Iraq. We have put 6,000 U.S. troops right in the middle of a cauldron, a complete morass, and they don't have any strategy, any goals and objectives whatsoever. And I think that's the worst thing that has come out of this Obama administration is this sense of mission creep and the optics of doing something when actually you're not doing anything whatsoever.
Joining us right now is former New York Lieutenant Governor and Trump supporter Betsy McCoy. Also with us is Chuck Rocha. He is Democratic strategist and president of Solidarity Strategies. Good to see you both. Thank you so much for joining us. So these emails, Betsy, give us your take here and the timing of it, obviously important right before.
Very important, but this lays out the Clinton triangle, how the Clinton family profiteered from Hillary Clinton's position as Secretary of State. Bill Clinton would rake in millions of dollars and put it in his own pocket for speaking fees and appointments of one sort or another, and then also mega millions for the Clinton Foundation, and then he would send his payers over to the State Department for whatever they needed, access to Hillary Clinton, decisions, dinners, and a lot of this is laid out in these WikiLeaks. Lorient University paying Bill Clinton $18 million for advice. That's more than the president of Harvard University earns. So this is really shocking. And in the process, they also violated laws, including tax laws, by failing to report gifts from foreign governments required by the IRS.
Yeah, Chuck, obviously this doesn't look good. Not good timing with 11 days before the election for Hillary Clinton.
Well, I run campaigns for a living, and optics is something you have to worry about, and this does not look good. Of course, obviously, if they'd have broke any law, they'd be in the jail. But what this thing shows you is what a lot of people think, right? And so they have to be able to pivot from this and go. And Donald Trump could have taken great advantage of this as just a strategist. And let me remind everybody, I've run a campaign against Hillary Clinton in the primary. There are things out there you can use to try to talk about the issues, but a lot of this campaign has not been about talking about the issues because of things that Donald Trump has said or other folks have said, when we could have been talking about Obamacare and debating the issues, talking about the foundation and debating the issues. We really never got to have that debate this evening, and much like my friend Dagan, that's why I got the puffy face, because I got 11 days left, and I don't know if I'm going to make it.
But let me tell you, I'm sure that the Democrats don't want to talk about Obamacare, but the fact is, it's very, very clear that whatever Hillary Clinton has done as Secretary of State, she's going to do it many-fold more when she has the whole U.S. government to sell instead of just the State Department. And that's part of the worry. She refused to put any limits on this when she was Secretary of State. The Senate pushed her to do it, and she refused. And now she has refused to close this foundation.
What do you say? What do you say?
Chuck, yeah, you sound like, I mean, this is obviously a great gift to the Trump campaign when you think about Obamacare and these WikiLeaks and the whole Clinton Inc. Scandal. But you sound like you don't think it's enough to change the narrative this close to the election. Is that
what you're saying?
Well, it's kind of like if a tree falls in the forest. When you run a campaign, you have an organized structure of multi-layered communication that goes on that if I was the opponent of Hillary, we would have had a plan to lay this out. There'd be TV commercials. There'd be ground operations where we were knocking on people's doors of just those people who were targeted, undecided people who we knew we could move, who may feel a little untrustworthy, where you can move those people one way or the other through digital advertising with a layered march of that issue. It's kind of been out there some, but not in the mainstream media. And that's where you lost it this year on not having 11 days to go, and we still aren't there.
Yeah, Dagan. Yeah.
Chuck, I mean, one of the issues you talked about untrustworthiness. How on earth are people supposed to trust Hillary Clinton right now?
Well, I think you would see a different dynamic if she wasn't running against Donald Trump. When I was running Bernie Sanders' campaign, right, we never had to even say the secretary's name. We never did any negative campaigning, and we almost won. We won 22 states, so you knew there was an undertow out there. So I think some people out there that are in the middle of the road are picking the lesser of two evils.
For sure.
Well, and you're seeing that in the polls in terms of the independents.
Yeah.
In terms of Donald Trump in the new Fox News poll gaining.
Independents
The lead. He already had a lead.
Yeah.
And now he gained in the lead.
And I think it's just so important that people understand that it's not necessarily just about Donald Trump. This is a vote against the establishment. People want a big change in Washington, D.C. They're like, this is not, they're not working for me, they're working for themselves.
It's the future of our nation is at stake. We will never have the rule of law again if Mrs. Clinton is president. And I will predict, if she becomes the first woman president, she will also be the first president in the 21st century to be impeached because she is not leaving her corrupt ways behind.
Well, I just point to the Kimberly Strassel editorial, which is in the Wall Street Journal, Potomac Watch, every Friday. And in her lead paragraph, a Hillary Clinton presidency will be built from the ground up on self-dealing, crony favors, and an utter disregard for the law. Yeah. Last night, I was watching Charles Krauthammer on Special Report, and he really hit it on the head in terms of this Doug Band memo. If people want to go and read the whole thing that came out of the WikiLeaks hack, he said, now we know how the Clintons, got obscenely rich without visible work.
That's right. Trump was building buildings, and what were they doing? How did they amass well over $100 million in just a few years?
Yeah, because Doug Band and Teneo were setting up speeches, setting up deals. And obviously, it did include access to the State Department. Lee Carter, we're happy you're here today because you looked at this week's campaign highlights and you put them to the dial test. Let's listen. Explain the yellow, green, and red lines first to make it real clear.
Yeah, so the yellow line is independence, and that's the most important one to watch right now because that's where this election is going to be won or lost. We've got the red line is Republicans, the blue line is Democrats. They don't surprise me as much as these yellow lines because we're seeing that independents are really breaking hard for Donald Trump again. We saw it earlier in the campaign. They lost him for a little bit. Watch them now.
This is when Hillary Clinton was questioned about WikiLeaks. Watch.
Secretary Clinton, are you truly concerned that Donald Trump would try to throw you in jail if you were elected? You brought that up at the rally tonight. And one other issue, there was a WikiLeaks email in which one of your top aides said that a Clinton Foundation conference that's now being labeled by some of your critics as a pay-to-play scheme was a mess of your own making. Could you comment on that as well?
No, I have nothing to say about WikiLeaks other than I think we should all be concerned about what the Russians are trying to do to our election and using WikiLeaks very blatantly to try to influence the outcome of the election. And I have no concerns about the first question whatsoever.
All right, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Favorite Miley Cyrus song?
Lee, walk us through what was going on there. We saw the yellow line coming down.
It was on the floor, and this is really, voters are reacting on a second-by-second basis. You can see as soon as Hillary Clinton pivoted to the response about and went over and started talking about this as an issue about Russia, folks just dropped to the floor. Right. Independents are not buying this argument, so they're reacting, and as soon as they hear that, they say, no way, I'm not buying it. And so we're just measuring how people are reacting, and what we send this out to 1,000 voters, and that's the reactions that we see. And frankly, you know, pivoting is a communication strategy that we see all the time. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. This does not work. People want an answer.
They're sticking to it. We saw them start this whole Russia narrative at the Democratic National Convention, Dagan.
Right.
Remember, that's where they started it, and they just have been driving it home the whole election.
And Trump has done himself no favors because he piled onto it and made that joke about Russia. I want to ask Chuck one thing. Chuck, you look back when you were working on the Sanders campaign, and don't you wish these WikiLeaks emails came out then?
Well, it would be interesting to see those in the days of the primary when I was a paid consultant for Bernie, and I think there would have been a different election. But I don't look back. I'll have to look forward. And what I was thinking about when Lee was talking about the dial testing was right now in elections, people are coming home, and people are already voting. In Nevada, 80% of people will have voted early before Election Day. So the election is happening right now. In my world, I'm doing phones and mail and reminding them to vote right now. And remember, if you lean a little bit more conservative, you're going to be more apt to go that way. So I think a lot of good things are happening across the country today.
All right, we'll leave it there.
Joining us right now here on the Curvy Couch, we've got Indiana Governor Mike Pence, who would like to be the next Vice President of the United States. And you were giggling looking at those images of those kids.
Well, I was too when I walked down the hallway. I mean, that's weird. I want to stop in for a...
Gee, I wonder what Mike Pence would look like as a cowboy and his wife as a ladybug. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
When was that?
Yeah. That was last year.
For Halloween.
Yeah, the governor's residence. It's one of the great traditions in Indiana. Indiana. Karen and I pass out candy at the governor's residence.
You doing it this? Can you dress up as the VP candidate?
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to happen this year with all of our travels.
Right?
But it's a great tradition. I love Halloween. I really do.
How are you feeling after last night's scare on the runway?
We're great. Thanks for asking. We just had we had about 10 seconds of uncertainty at the end of that landing, but just so thankful. So thankful to our pilots and, frankly, to the first responders. The plane had no sooner come to a stop that I felt like we were surrounded by first responders.
So by uncertainty, do you mean terror?
No, it was just uncertainty, Tucker. We came down. It was a low ceiling. We landed, but it was, I think, obvious to everybody on the plane that they were hitting the brakes very hard, trying to bring the aircraft to a stop. We fishtailed a little bit, and then we passed through that part where the concrete breaks apart.
The arrestor blocks.
And then we saw, I saw mud splash up on the windows on either side of the front of the aircraft, and that's when I knew we were probably off the runway. But, our son is a Marine Corps aviator, and he says all the time, Dad, any landing you walk away from is a successful landing. So we feel very fortunate and very moved, frankly, by the outpouring of concern for us and our family and our staff and all the people that were on the plane.
You were on the tarmac shaking hands with all the first responders.
Well, I was very impressed with them. They were literally, Ainsley, they were on the scene almost before the plane stopped rolling, and got everybody off very easily and very quickly, and I just felt the opportunity to shake their hands and give them a word of encouragement.
Yeah, we just had a local reporter on who said the preliminary assessment is that the pilot may have landed a little too far down the runway and overshot things.
Well, we'll leave that to the experts, and but I can just tell you we have a saying in our family that the safest place in the world is to be in the center of God's will. So we had no anxiety throughout all of it. I turned to Karen after the plane came to a stop. I asked her if she's okay. She's a pilot. She said, I'm fine. And we're back on the campaign trail today. We'll be in Pennsylvania, be in North Carolina, and looking forward to getting back out there and telling the story of the man I hope becomes the next president of the United States.
Well, maybe on Monday on Halloween you could dress up as a pilot? Flight attendant?
Well, my wife is the pilot, and our son's a pilot. So
okay, she'll be the pilot, you'll be the flight attendant.
Somebody did send me a picture of a little boy that dressed up for Halloween as Mike Pence. And
were you flattered?
I was actually very flattered.
You're so busy running for VP, you're probably not reading all the WikiLeaks emails. But I want to read you a line, and I want you to tell me, is this uttered by a Republican or a Democrat? And it's a quote. Do we actually know who told Hillary she could use a private email? And has that person been drawn and quartered? The whole thing is blanking insane. I'm going to give it away. That's from Neera Tanden, former head of the Center for American Progress and a close aide to Hillary. Her own aides are saying this is nuts.
Well, look, and it's not just the decision to have a private server. It's that while Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State in charge of all of America's foreign policy, she had a private family foundation that was taking money from foreign governments and foreign donors, and then had a private server, presumably to keep all of the traffic and dialogue about all of that out of the public reach. But as I say at our rallies, truth is a force of nature. This information is coming out, not just by WikiLeaks, but by freedom of information requests and some good journalism around the country. And what the American people are seeing more and more is just the kind of pay-to-play politics where donors were giving to their foundation, and then were given special consideration for contracts to rebuild Haiti, where we see now this what's being called Clinton Incorporated, where donors to the foundation, many of whom were lobbying the State Department, were also hiring former President Bill Clinton. And this is just the kind of pay-to-play politics that the American people are tired of, benefits the favored few, and it's the kind of politics that'll end the day that Donald Trump becomes president of the United States.
Well, a lot of people are disgusted when they see the stories about WikiLeaks. Unfortunately, there aren't that many channels that are covering them.
That's right.
And you were talking about good journalists. There are not a lot of print reporters who are doing it. And to a lot of people, mainly on your side, it looks like the press is in the tank for her.
Well, I think since I joined this campaign, it's been 2-on-1 with the mainstream media doing most of Hillary Clinton's work for every day. We just saw Media Research Center came out with a study that the network evening news over the last 3 months that Donald Trump had gotten the majority of coverage, but 91% of the coverage of my running mate had been negative. But I have to tell you, the momentum in this campaign is incredible. I was campaigning with Donald Trump in Cleveland over the weekend. Tens of thousands of people coming out, and even rallies that I'm doing across the West and across the heartland this week. We'll have hundreds and hundreds of people come out. The American people know we can be stronger. They know we can be more prosperous, but they know it's going to take real change in the White House and a change of direction and leadership to do that. And that's why I think we're seeing so many Republicans, independents, and many Democrats preparing to stand with and voting for Donald Trump as the next president.
So it seems to be closing a little bit the polls in a way that benefits you all. And I heard someone say yesterday, maybe it's because Trump seems to be talking less about himself and more about the issues. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
I don't think that's fair. I think from the beginning of this campaign, Donald Trump has been giving voice to the frustrations and the aspirations of the American people like no one in my lifetime since Ronald Reagan. And you've seen that not only in the convention where he talked about standing up for the forgotten men and women in this country, and then week after week where the other campaign, it seems like, has been more focused on what they don't like about our team. Donald Trump has been out there almost every day laying out the kind of policies that'll make America great again.
What is he going to do in the next 11 days?
I think what you're going to see is Donald Trump and I both out all across this country, carrying that positive, optimistic message that we can make America great again, straight to the American people. I think, to understand this campaign, to understand our nominee, is to understand that this is a movement of the American people, and we both believe as we continue to carry that message all across this country, the American people are going to make America great again.
Well, 11 days is the final voting, and the news this morning is that South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, who had kind of backed away from you guys for a while, now says she's going to vote for you. What's your message to Republicans who, whether they were never Trumpers or whatever, they said, I don't know. Ultimately, they go into that voting booth in a couple of Tuesdays. Oh, 2 Tuesdays from now. What do they need to think about that?
Well, look, number one, my respect for Governor Haley is boundless. She's done a great job in South Carolina. We're grateful for her support, grateful for Congressman Chaffetz's expressed support earlier this week. I think you're seeing Republicans and conservatives come together around the Trump-Pence team, but also just around our message of change, of rebuilding our military, of reviving our economy through tax relief, repealing Obamacare, smarter and tougher trade deals, repealing all those unconstitutional executive orders Barack Obama's put into law. And I think you're especially seeing Republicans and conservatives recognizing that we want a Supreme Court and appointments to the Supreme Court that will uphold our most cherished liberties in the Constitution. That's going to take electing Donald Trump as President of the United States, but it's also going to take re-electing Republican majorities in the United States House and in the United States Senate. And so my message as I've traveled around this week is we're grateful for the support from many independents who are tired of gridlock, grateful for the support of many Democrats who are tired of seeing our jobs shipped overseas and liberal policies, but also my message to any Republicans is it's time to come home. It's time to elect Donald Trump as the next president. It's time to re-elect our Republican majorities, and it's time to do everything in our power to make sure that Hillary Clinton is never elected president of the United States.
All right, Governor.
Governor Mike Pence.
Thank you.
We wish you all the best over the next 11 days.
Thank you.
He's coming to town to do it, and they were all pretty rattled, but they're all okay this morning. And he's joining us live next hour on the couch, I believe.
There was lots of rain last night, but we're glad everyone's okay.
That's right. Meanwhile, look who's joining us right now. Karl Rove joins us from, I believe, Austin, Texas. Yep, there's the State House behind you. Good morning, Mr. Rove.
Good morning. Carl, when Steve said that you have your whiteboards, I was like, oh my gosh, it's that time. We have 11 days until this election. What can you predict?
Well, it's not. I'm not going to be in the predictive business. I can tell you that the path ahead. Let's take a look at the Real Clear Politics average of recent state polls. We start with the Romney states. Right today, Romney got 206 electoral votes. Today in the Romney states, Trump is behind in Arizona and North Carolina. So he's got about 180 electoral college votes today that are relatively safe. So the first thing he's got to do is win the 2 states where he's ahead in the Real Clear Politics average, Ohio and Iowa. That gets him to 204. Then there are several states where he's close. He's down by 1.5 in Arizona, 0.8 in Florida, 2 points in Nevada. If he were able to win those 3 states, it gets him to 250, awfully close to that 270. Then he's got to win North Carolina, where he's down by 3 in the Real Clear Politics average. And then it gets tough because these states here, Minnesota, I'm sorry, I screwed it up there, Minnesota, he's down by 4.6, Pennsylvania 5, Wisconsin 6, New Hampshire and Colorado 6.2, Michigan 7, Virginia 8.3. He's got some room to make up in these states here in order to get to 270. If he gets Minnesota, he's at 270. Pennsylvania, he's at 280. In Wisconsin, he's at 270. New Hampshire only gets him 4 electoral votes, so he's got to get New Hampshire and say Colorado, which gets him a total of 13. Anyway, he's got some difficulties once he gets into this territory.
Carl, what does your gut tell you? I mean, you've seen wave elections before. I don't know if this is a wave, but he's such a non-traditional candidate, and the legions of people who are supporting him, come hell or high water, we don't know exactly who they are, but it sure seems like there are a lot of them.
Yeah, well, look, they're betting on a theory called the 5 million missing. The view is that Barack Obama won in 2012 because 4 million, he won by 4.9 million. The theory is there are 5 million mostly blue-collar, working-class whites who stayed home. And the idea is that they were not attracted by Romney and his message, even though they could never bring themselves to vote for Obama. And the question is going to be between now and the election day, are those people drawn into the system? Are they brought out to vote? And do they show up and alter the dynamic of the election by increasing the share of the vote that's cast by whites? And bringing up 5 million additional people. We'll see in 11 days. So far, he is underperforming among whites compared to Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney got 59% among whites. In the Fox poll, Trump was at 49%. He could theoretically get to match the performance of Romney, but basically by taking virtually every undecided white left in the poll, and some of those committed to the minor party candidates.
So, Carl, I want to ask you about voter fraud. Trump and his surrogates have been talking a lot about it recently, alleging it. The question of non-qualified voters voting, there are millions of non-citizens with driver's licenses in this country. What would prevent them from voting? How hard is it for someone who is not a citizen but who has a government ID to vote in this election?
Well, it depends on the state, and depends on the state party's rule, the state's rules regarding registering to vote and voting. For example, some states require a certain level of documentation, and they also ask you to affirmatively, upon pain of criminal offense, to affirm that you're a U.S. citizen, that you're eligible to vote. So there's some of this, and how much we really don't know, but it is a problem. That's why voter ID laws are important, because at least they provide one additional instance where people have to sort of document themselves in order to be able to vote, and then when they show up to vote, have to prove that they're themselves. There's another issue, though, that I want to quickly address because it involves my home state of Texas. There was a woman in Randall County, Texas, who was up in the Panhandle near Amarillo. And she wrote on her Facebook page that she'd had difficulty with the Texas device, and that she had tried to vote the straight party ticket and had gotten to the end. This is a thing where you go in and you have a little red dial, and you dial through each of the offices, and then you hit a button when it gets to your choice. And at the end of it, you're then given a screen that shows your choices. And when she got to the end of the screen, instead of the straight Republican ballot that she wanted to cast, she had cast a Democratic ballot. Now, the machine allows you then to go back and correct it. And she put this up as a cautionary item saying, watch out, make certain that you're playing with that red device correctly. And this has been somehow turned into an accusation that election officials in Texas are trying to steal the election from Donald Trump. Randall County is about as red a part of America as you can get. I think Mitt Romney got over 3/4 of the vote there. This was a woman raising a concern saying, be careful, if you haven't used this device before, make certain that you check at the end that you've entered your choices right. So we got to be careful about quickly conflating this woman's experience with a new device she hadn't used before with some kind of accusation that here in Texas we're trying to steal the election from whoever's choice the voter had made.
You know, sometimes with these newfangled gizmos we're unfamiliar with, we make mistakes. So just be careful.
Exactly.
Check your work before you submit it to the voting folks.
Thank you, Carl.
All right.
There was one lady who said she did it and she couldn't change her